Hello and welcome to Talking About Scottish Property. This is actually part two of a two-part series, and we're with Colin Macmillan from Glasgow Property Letting, a prominent letting agent in Glasgow. Thanks for coming, Colin. Moving on quickly, we're going to talk in this part about the Glasgow property market. The first part that we talked about was to do with the rent increases and long-term Scottish Government planning on the Scottish private rented sector. So definitely get a listen to that if you get a chance. So moving straight into Glasgow Property Letting, the name of your business as well, Colin. What sort of trends are you seeing just now in Glasgow?
Well, we're seeing a lot of landlords have decided to, sell up, but the flip side of that is a lot of landlords looking to, come in to the market. We're dealing with a lot of foreign investors. We're trying to advise them, but where's best to rent out in the city? I've always maintained, obviously, West End, city centre, South Side, and obviously, Denniston, the Denniston pocket between High Street, Alexander Parade and Duke Street, and all the way to Belgrove. That area, the Avenues area, is always very popular because you're paying, you're getting a good quality property for maybe slightly less than you would do city centre wise.
What kind of people are renting those properties, Colin?
I would say professionals, mature students, overseas students. There's also the New Gorbals development, Oatlands development. There's wee pockets springing up which provide you accessibility into the city centre. Transport networks, good rails, buses, underground. I can see areas like, Govan, for example. Again, that's an area, so it's on the main route to the new hospital. Pedestrian bridge going over there from Govan Square across to the Transport Museum. That's going to link Govan to the West End, which again, people might be able to, buy something there, still be able to work in the West End city centre. So we're actually seeing quite a lot of demand. So provided you're on the arterial routes, you're all right. If you're off the beaten track, further out, I think that would be a bit of a risk, I would say.
Is there any thoughts on a lot of the offices within Glasgow city centre? Like a lot of cities, there are, I don't know what the percentage is, but 50% occupancy or something like that. Is that, there's the new Barclays Bank and so on there. Is there any? I think
the new Barclays Bank was a very shrewd investment. Obviously before COVID, they were going through the plans. It's now linked up. They built in what was the Tradeston area with warehouses and so on, and yet it's only 100 metres from the International Financial Services District in kind of Oswald Street, York Street area. So that's been quite good. It was built, I believe, for 5,000 people. Obviously, with self-distancing, that amount is reduced considerably, maybe to 2,500. A lot more people working from home, hybrid working scenarios. But there's accommodation down there as well. I think it's quite the city centre itself, I would say, with the LEZ zone coming in next year, that will affect people looking to rent offices in the city centre. We're seeing a lot more people moving out, industrial estates, shops. There's a few large developments in Glasgow, Goldberg's development. There is talk about the John Lewis development up the top. Cathedral Street, been trying to reintroduce people to come into the city, but again, they're moving into the city, but no traffic, no cars, and all the rest of it. They don't want the cars, So it's that, they want money coming into the city, but do they really want it? If they're preventing people from going in, I think that will be. Obviously Edinburgh is. They've had. I wouldn't even think about driving into the centre of Edinburgh just now. It's worried I would go up the wrong street or whatever. But Glasgow's going to be like that come June time. So.
Yeah, I think the Scottish Government are really big on these 20-minute neighbourhoods where you could sort of work, live, and sort of leisure activities all within a 20-minute area of you.
Yeah.
So it's not always possible, I imagine. But if they're building these developments, then I suppose they take everything like that into consideration. Glasgow's probably got the biggest sort of build to rent sector in Scotland, significantly
Huge.
more. Edinburgh probably tells you a little bit about the geography of Glasgow and how they've got so many sort of areas for redevelopment and gap sites that maybe other cities in Scotland just don't have.
Yeah, I think the build to rent is it's an ever expanding market, that's for sure. There was a slight hiccup recently, where people wanted to live. It's like executive apartments where you go into the building and everything is there, the pod, and you've got your cinema room, you've got your gymnasium, everything's kind of on site, and I get that for a certain sector of the market, which will be your kind of professionals, young professional transient marketplace. I do. Me personally, I would hate to live there like a commune, but I can see the benefits of that. People coming in from abroad, but again, it's not necessarily going to be the student market. It might be the overseas student market that's going to pitch in there because they'll be able to afford slightly inflated rents. But I think there's a lot of buildings in Glasgow. Dallion House being one at Charing Cross, which has been empty for 15 years, something like that. But again, the problem with a lot of these buildings, you've got asbestos. Mm-hmm. So you can't renovate them. You can't put them into student accommodation, would have to be knocking down and starting again. There is a definite regeneration in Glasgow along the Brumelaw. There's a lot more building going in. They're using the river as the outlook, as the backdrop. And I think that will definitely help bring people into the city. But as far as living, I think they've got to go slightly further afield than that.
Yeah. And like many
I'm sure Edinburgh is very similar. I'm sure Edinburgh has similar pockets as well.
Yeah.
And Glasgow's, it's an easy place to get about in. Yeah. Which is
I think I suppose like any part of Scotland, Glasgow's seen a sort of bounce in property prices over the last couple of years since COVID. I think we did a blog on Glasgow property prices recently, and I think it was in 2020 the average price was 136,000, and last year it was up to 177,000. So it's quite a significant increase. Like many parts of Scotland have seen that increase since the first lockdown was lifted and the property market went up. I suppose we're seeing a little bit of a cool down in prices, but any drop in price isn't going to take it back down past the 2020 average prices. So I suppose it shows you the investment opportunities in Glasgow still with lots of regeneration, lots of new transport projects, and a lot of buildings going on, and just that sort of strong yields. Glasgow is, so we get a lot of overseas buyers inquiring about Glasgow. So you see that Glasgow is a good city to invest in. So we'd obviously with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's got a lot to offer. I think a lot of it's not a big city. It's a very easy city to get about, and I think once foreign students, foreign professionals come into the city, they realise, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be living right in the financial services district, one walk to work. You can actually be slightly further out, and to get an hour you can be in Edinburgh. Whereas there's some cities in the world, London, you could be travelling all day and not quite get across the city. We're also seeing an issue about obviously student accommodation. That's the massive thing last year, was students and where they're going to find. A lot of landlords are not necessarily wanting students because of the private residential tenancy, the PRT. Students will give notice potentially at the end of May. You could have June, July, August, quarter of the year before they move back in, or before the property is relet again. So that's a quarter of the year that they're not potentially getting rent. I'm reading today about 75% of purpose-built student accommodation in Glasgow is in for Strathclyde University is already reserved. 75%. So, you're suddenly going to get to the end, all these students now start looking, and I think the clearance, Glasgow University oversubscribing spaces, I think that didn't help. But I say it, a lot of landlords are in a position where they're just saying, well, we've had enough. We don't want to deal with students, not because of discriminate against students, but just because they're in a position where the lease, the way the PRT is formed now, you can't give there is scope for a potential void of a quarter of the year, which is a heck of a lot when you're a landlord.
Yeah,
and that's your main income.
Those utility bills on for that period as well. So although it's living in the property, you still have to pay something towards it.
Yeah. But I say the professionals, you don't get that because they're not governed by the academic year. And I'm sure Edinburgh is the same. I'm sure Edinburgh will be the same.
Well, I mean, there's obviously this thing about serviced accommodation as well. So that previously any gap was filled by letting it to, well, in Edinburgh's case, in the festival and so on. But that's going to change in Edinburgh, certainly with licensing coming in. So if you've got an HMO license, the question is, can you have a serviced accommodation license? Can you just transfer them both? I don't think you can. Will you get a license to do holiday lets? So, the whole student HMO, classic student HMO in both Edinburgh and Glasgow is becoming a rarer beast.
I think it is, and I think the HMO properties themselves obviously need more. They're mainly, a lot of them are traditional properties. There's more maintenance, whereas a purpose-built student accommodation, if they can get it, is like a clean, hygienic pod, and you've got everything on site. So there's a lot to be gained from that. Whereas the drafty old HMO properties that we all remember as students,
Character building stuff.
Character building, yeah, exactly.
Great. Okay, cheers, Colin. Ross, anything else to talk about Glasgow?
No, I think that's it. I think that's a good overview, and it's certainly we get a lot of buyers looking for at the Glasgow market for various reasons. So it's definitely obviously the changes that the Scottish Government have brought out haven't impacted the desire for people to look in the city and invest in the city, which is a good thing. I think on one of the on the group chats about the rent increase, someone had mentioned something that's to say that the zero rent increase cap was about as effective as throwing eggs at a tank, which I thought was quite a good one because it didn't have the impact it was looking to have on the rent cap. So it's good to see that, as Colin said, Colin's taking calls from landlords on a daily basis. It's good to hear that from Colin that it hasn't really impacted too many people. There is some people have decided to sort of sell up, but it's always the case. Chris and I are always hearing from people before the rent cap. As soon as we started up, we both used to be letting agents, and always be the case that landlords at some point in time were selling up because they came to the end of the buy-to-let journey.
That's right. Yeah, no, it's very true. I mean, I think people always are. I think property is still a fairly solid bet, regardless of which market you're in. It's if you're looking at short term, maybe not long term. Yes, it definitely gives you that longevity.
Yeah, we recently run a poll online asking if property was still a good long-term investment, and 97% said yes, it was. So there's still a lot of people that think the same way.
Banks still lending, it's still very, very, very possible to invest in property, and
invest in bricks and mortar, and you can't go wrong.
Correct. Thank you very much, Colin. Good to see you.
Pleasure, as
Thanks
always.
for everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.